Call this meeting to order. Treasurer, could you take roll?
Colonel Evans?
Here.
Mr. Grozan?
Yes. Sorry.
Mrs. Ludwig?
Here.
Mr. Miko?
Here.
Mr. Naso?
Here.
All present.
Stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Brings us to district goals. Every meeting we talk about our district goals. Our number one is student achievement. With the school year off and running, I can see that that's well in hand. Second one is financial prudence. Every decision we make is weighed against maximizing every tax dollar that we get. And third is community engagement, and we look to our community to help us get things done and get better. So I'd like to thank them for all the time they've put in on so many different issues. So with that, we'll move on to public comment. We have none, so we'll move on to the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. Naso. I did have one discussion item for tonight. Just wanted to give some highlights for the upcoming school year. Our internet is currently down, so the slides that would typically be projected, I've shared those with the board prior to, and so I've got them on my computer. I can see them. But I just wanted to highlight, as Mr. Naso shared in the past, that this July the board and the administrative team got together to look at our Strong Schools 2020 plan, our plan of looking at how we can work to become a premier district in the region and the state by 2020. And every year when we work on that plan, the goals of academic achievement and growth, financial prudence, and community engagement stay the same. The objectives relatively stay the same, but each year we look at action steps. What do we want to do this year to continue to move forward, to continue to evolve as a district for our students and community? And so what I wanted to do today is provide a few highlights of what some of those action steps are in the plan that we're going to be focusing in or on this school year. So the first, let's focus on academic achievement and growth. One of the things that we're going to be working on is a continuation from last year of aligning our secondary course offerings. So we started this process last year. We noticed that we had courses offered at the middle school level that didn't have a pathway at the high school. And so we're going to continue to enhance that, focusing on our new our new block or double period English language arts and mathematics courses at the middle school, as well as our STEM and college career readiness courses, and making sure that there's a nice transition from middle school to high school. The other thing that we're going to be working on is our common assessment plan. Last year, we spent time with all of our teachers, pre-K to 12, looking at what common assessments we wanted to put in place. Now, when we look at that, I always use the example of the elementary schools because we have 5 different buildings. And what we said to teachers is that we don't want to add more assessments. We want to keep our assessments at a level that we think is appropriate. But in math, if in 3rd grade math, you're going to give a Chapter 4 test, let's all give the same Chapter 4 test. So those have been developed last year. They're going to be implemented this year, and it's going to give us the ability as a district in English, language arts, and mathematics, as well as other subject areas, to look at holistically how are our students performing, and are they on pace to meet grade level expectations by the end of the year. We spent a lot of time, as we've talked in the past, about focusing on improving writing instruction. We implemented a new program at the elementary level, Lucy Calkins, last year. That will continue. But our focus this year will be, again, on writing in grades 6 to 12. So one of the things that our teachers worked on last year was developing a common writing rubric for all non-English language arts courses. And then what we're also going to do is they have developed and are developing a writing assignment, 1 per quarter in those courses. So it's not a separate, I don't want parents to think, oh no, here my child's going to have to write, 5 5-page essays in all of their classes in 6 to 12. No, it's, if you're in an art class, your writing would be on a reflection of a piece of art or a historical perspective of an art, or in a math class, what was the problem-solving process you went through to get to the solution? Or in science, it may be a lab report that you have to do a little more extended response on. So looking at how do we embed writing, the cognitive process of writing helps kids to think through, to reflect on what they've learned, and to put it on paper. How can we use that process of writing beyond the reading classroom, the English language arts, to enhance our students' understanding and knowledge? As we've talked about, we have instructional coaches now in our district. We had a $1.2 million grant that we were awarded. 3 of those instructional coaches have started working at the elementary level. One is assigned K to 1, another 2 to 3, and the third grades 4 to 5 to work on enhancing and supporting our teachers as they implement reading and writing instruction. We do have one literacy coach that's paid outside of the grant for the middle school and high school. So we've met, Aaron Green, our curriculum director, has met with them frequently. We've met with them, and it's just, the teachers are embracing it. They are in the classrooms, they're meeting with teachers. It's been a great start to the school year, and they've done a wonderful job. The other thing that we're focused on, and parents should have gotten an email about setting up their new account, but is the unified classroom. Over 300 of our teachers have been trained on the unified classroom. It's a one-stop shop for having a website, assignments, grading, upcoming events. Jenny's created one, I've created one, how do we align our meeting structures, but we want our parents to be patient as we're developing that as we go. But if I'm a high school student, I can log into my unified classroom and I can see every course I take on one page. And I can click on the link and see what is there for my math class or my English language arts class or elective class, whatever it may be. The other thing under academic achievement and growth we're working on is developing a culture playbook. We spent a lot of time last year doing a survey looking at where we're at with our district culture and climate. We have a representative group of people. We've just finalized the first draft of our culture playbook. And when we say culture playbook, it really is, what are our core values as a district? We have various belief statements around, but truly, what do we value as an organization, as a public school, and how do those values drive our behaviors, and how do those behaviors lead to the outcomes we want to see for our district, for our students, and for our adults? So we've got a great start on that and more to come. The other thing that we've done last year and will extend is Makerspace. We have Makerspaces in all of our media centers across the district, excluding the preschool. Simply, there's not enough space. But it's about now, how do we truly integrate it as a component of student learning? And that's what Vicky's working on this year, is how do we make it a meaningful part of student learning rather than just a nice space in the media center. We'll also be working on getting a STEAM or STEM designation. We have selected the middle school. We believe we've done a lot of work around the district of integrating STEM into our schools. However, we want to focus on the middle school, do a self-assessment, and then eventually apply this year for that STEM designation, with the idea that this would be the starting point to expand it beyond the middle school in future years. And then Jenny's going to take the lead on doing an equity audit, making sure that all of our kids have equal access to staff, resources, courses, activities based on what their needs are. And then the other part is doing a grading and homework practices audit to see how are we using homework in 2018-19, is it meaningful, and how are we grading that to truly share an assessment of student learning. In financial prudence, a couple of things that Mr. Breckner is going to be working on this year. We're going to be looking at GPS and video surveillance for our buses. Looking at how that can be an asset not only for us as we monitor our fleet around the district and look at timings, but also options for parents to be able to look on a secure app and say, hey, I see where my child's bus is at. I know they're running a few minutes late or a few minutes ahead of schedule. And then the video surveillance we think is just good practice to move forward with. He'll also be working on looking at expanding our recycling program. We currently have paper recycling across the district, but as you can imagine, with all the vending machines, there's a lot of bottles. There's a lot of bottled water. How do we expand that beyond paper recycling to include items such as bottles or cardboard or glass? And Mr. Breckner will be researching that as well. In addition to looking at capital improvement projects as we get ready for next summer's projects with the monies that will be remaining from the bond fund dollars. In addition, George is working on this year looking at our internal financial controls. He actually met with all of our administrators today to share updates and procedures for how we approve, for how we, what was that?
Deny.
Approve, deny, but how we look at all of our purchasing procedures and make sure those controls are in place. As we went through with the auditor's investigation last year, They did share with us that we had good controls in place, but it really is looking at how can we enhance them, how can we make them stronger, and George has put some great procedures into place that we're rolling out this month. As well as a physical inventory, we had the board approved Asset Works to come in and do a full asset inventory. That's been completed, right, George?
Great, they've come in, did the work, they've retagged every asset that meets our threshold. Right now, we're doing the reconciliation process through our current system. So the physical inventory's been done, but right now we're reconciling our books. So hopefully that should be done within the next month. And also, last meeting that was approved was a new software system to track it.
Yep.
So the important piece is not just doing it, but also maintaining it and tracking it.
And the last thing under financial prudence that we're working on is we have a district safety plan, continuing to implement the district safety plan in collaboration with the safety officials in the city. Finally, under community engagement, we use a lot of videos across our district for either learning or promotion, but Dan is going to work on continuing to expand for our promotional and marketing videos as a district. We have a business advisory council that's been established, and we'll continue to work for and with them. We're going to work as a consortium with Polaris, as well as our own business community, to look at how do we ensure our students are college, career, or military ready. Erin and her groups are going to work on implementing curricular nights this year with the literacy coaches. So looking at how can we bring those nights in to share with our parents, whether elementary or secondary. Here's some curricular areas of focus this year. Here's how you can help support from home. Here's the materials we're using. There's so many web-based resources that are out there now, making sure parents are up to speed on that. We are also going to take a look at expanding beyond our online store. We have an online apparel outlet that we run 3 times a year. It just concluded, Pat, last month. But how can we bring a campus store so we have a physical store on our property where students or community members or parents can come buy Strongsville Mustang gear? Jenny's going to work with the high school on how do we enhance our communications with college and career preparations for our students. It can be a very complex and confusing avenue to go through, especially if it's your first child graduating from high school. So she'll be working on that to ensure our parents are well informed. Dan is working on a parent ambassador group that he'll be rolling out here soon. And then Steve is also going to be working on exploring the possibility of having a summer breakfast and lunch program for our district. So we have students that qualify for free and reduced lunch. There's other neighboring districts or area districts that have a lunch program or breakfast program during the summer months, so those students can get the necessary nutrition and food that they need when school's not in session. That's something that Mr. Breckner believes strongly we need to take a look at, so he'll be doing some research and hopefully with the goal of being ready for implementation if everything works out and it makes sense and it's financially sound for the district and in the best interest of the kids for summer of 19. So that's some of the highlights of what we'll be working on this year. If anybody in the community wants to see the full plan, it's on the superintendent's web. So if you go to strongnet.org, click on superintendent, it can give you the full plan, all of the action steps, the evaluation criteria we use, as well as how we did last year. Our annual report from last year for each of the objectives is up there as well for the community to see and get as much detail as they'd like to on what we're working on this year as a school district. So unless there's any questions or feedback from the board, that's the highlights that I wanted to share for the upcoming school year.
Thank you very much. That was good. Anybody have any questions?
All right, with that, I'm going to ask Mr. Breckner, our operations manager, to come up for his items for this month.
Good evening, everyone. Just waiting for I was able to get the slides up on the computer here. So, yep, okay. All right. A couple items for you tonight. The first one is a discussion item. One thing that I was asked to look at is, and put together is a facility rental proposal. Right now we're charging a certain rate, and as I go through my proposal, you can see what my recommendation will be for that rate. Right now these are our current rates. For the high school auditorium and middle school auditorium, it's $50 an hour. Little theater at the high school is $35 an hour. A classroom is $15 an hour. I'm just hitting the highlights. And the gymnasium at the high school is $75 and the middle school is $75. As you look at these rates, realize these rates have not been changed in a very long time. While our facilities have been upgraded, the rates have not changed. One of the issues that we had last year is we had a lot of groups coming in. We have never had the amount of space available for the public. With the middle school being opened up, with the auditorium being opened up, we went from not just one site that was usually at the high school, we went to 2. With that, we've always had the high school, at least in my former job as the assistant principal, I was in charge of activities. I was kind of an island unto myself because we only had one venue. When we opened up the middle school, we now had 2 sites, and we had a lot of people coming in, and we really didn't have the controls in place to offer the best customer support. We had some confusing messages back and forth. What does the high school offer versus what does the middle school offer? And no one really knew the difference. It led to some confusion for some of our customers that came in. So the decision was made last year to not have outside groups outside of Strongsville renting our facilities because of some of the confusion that was going on. This year that's not the case, but with the time I had last year, I put together this proposal so that we could look at some of the rates. Here's a comparison with some similar local school districts. You can see the school districts there at the top: Brecksville, Westlake, Medina, Brunswick, and North Royalton. You can see on that very top line, we're well below some of these other schools. Almost across the board, the cafeteria were lower, classrooms were lower than some schools. We're the lowest on the chart, or at least we tied for the lowest, with Westlake on the classrooms. And you can see the gym, we're low even there. So some of our high volume areas, we're charging the least amount for schools that are around us. And not every school around us charges for facilities, because not every school around us offers their facilities. Some do not. Some of the blanks are there because, quite frankly, they either don't have the facility to rent, or they choose not to rent that facility to the public.
Steve, when you talk about the gymnasium at the high school or the middle school, we're talking one section of the gymnasium, correct?
Correct.
Not the back gym or the middle gym or anything of that nature.
Correct. At the high school, we just say the gym, and that's we rent all of them if needed, but it's at the same rate, even though it's a different quality of gym for us at the high school. The middle school, you'll see in the proposal that I have, right now we don't differentiate between them, even though they're 2 different venues. So a summary of our current state: we're well beneath the cost of similar local school districts. The rates were created before construction and renovation. Just the wear and tear of using the facilities, it's not being offset by the amount that we are charging. Now, to be fair, custodial fees are built into the facility rental. So that's a wash. Whatever our custodians are being paid is being paid by that group. So I'm not counting that. I'm being fair to that number. But paper products, utilities being used, cleaning supplies, just the normal wear and tear of having people in and out of our facility, it's not being covered by the small amount that we're charging for this.
And you're sure your rates are apples to apples? Like, that's the same when you see that we're at 50 and other schools are at 2.25? That's the same. The custodial fee isn't built into that 225 number that you looked at?
That's correct.
Okay.
It was always separate. The custodial
Okay.
fees were separate. And it's not revenue neutral, not even close. Inconsistency of charges, this is what I was talking about before. Some groups are being charged differently. We had some groups that had been here for a while, and they were charged one flat rate, and I could not find the impetus or the equation to come to that flat rate, but they were just given a flat rate where a similar school or a similar group that could come in would be charged on an hourly basis. So we just had inconsistencies of how we were even charging some of our groups. Some groups were not being charged when custodians were needed. So we were paying that cost out of pocket, even though it was a group coming in, not during school hours. We were still paying those costs for those custodians and eating that cost. And then there were some disputes of charges. Some groups would say, well, I was promised we could have rigging in the stage, and we don't offer rigging on the stage. You told me that we could have X number of classrooms, and those weren't available for whatever reason. So the inconsistency of having each school take care of their own facility needed revamped as well, which was leading to some charges that were being disputed. So what I'm proposing is the creation of 3 groups, and other schools have done this as well. So you would have 3 tiers. The first tier would be an internal Strongsville City Schools group. That's our choir, our band, our orchestra, etc., our activities, and our clubs. These groups will not be charged anything. Obviously, they're for our kids, for our students. They're being led in large part by our teachers and our faculty. So they would not be charged rental fees or custodial fees. So that would be the first group. The second group are the community groups, the Boy and Girl Scouts, PTA, any of the 501(c) groups, SSO, SFL, the like. They would not be charged facility fees, but there would be some custodial fees charged for the use of the facility. And then everyone else. All other organizations that don't fall into those first 2 tiers would be in the third, and those groups are both charged facility fees and custodial fees.
My only other thought with number 2 is Strongsville Rec. You know, those programs have been very generous to us and allow us to use some of their facilities. Let's at least, if we're talking about community groups,
Mhm.
the city did a great job for us, helping us out with the middle school. Just a thought, have that conversation with with Cameron and Jenny about where do you put them in, because they've always helped us out.
And I agree. We've always had a good relationship with them. It wasn't an exhaustive group, so I would include them in that tier 2
But we
group.
also have to be careful. That's their business. And I know it's a community thing, but they could easily overwhelm our facilities with their needs, right? Like they elected not to participate in the turf program, right? So they don't get the turf for free.
I don't disagree, but that at least you need to have that conversation regarding the city and what their needs or wants might be.
Down at the bottom, I did not include a slide with all of this, but we have changed our internal procedures. We're not having the buildings renting out their own facilities any longer. It's all coming through business services.
Perfect.
Every building has created a Google Calendar that is shared with the business services office. That calendar is then generated into one big calendar for us. So groups that are wanting to come in, internal groups, that could be handled by the buildings, put on their calendar, it automatically generates. That's the nice thing about the Google Calendar. Any other group would have to fill out an application, whether they're being charged the facility or not, or the custodial fees or not, they're still gonna have to fill this out, and the approval process goes through business services. Not the high school secretary, not the middle school secretary. That's where we're having issues. It was just a
Right.
classic case of too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah, this is so great, Steve, because last year we had a problem with people who develop relationships with either the custodians or the principals or whoever it might be, and then they would just walk in and like, hey, we're signed up for this. Oh, yeah, and then the custodians didn't know any different. There was no place for them to check to see if this was actually legitimate, and I know in one case, someone did that, kind of moved our regular boys' basketball team off their own court, had them go to half the court where they took the other half, and they weren't even supposed to be there, and it's just like, they had that relationship and they just think that they can use our facilities, for their own needs.
I
And-
agree, and
Yep,
it was
this
putting
is
some
great.
of our principals in a bad spot too.
Right,
Because they
yeah.
thought they were doing what they were supposed to be doing, signing off on the facility. Business services had no idea the groups were coming in. There was no estimate of costs that was applied, so it was all word of mouth.
Mhm.
Next thing you know, the group's already out, they've had their event, and we're lagging behind in our paperwork. So we're streamlining it, so a group can come in. We would then look at the calendar, make sure it's available, and then talk to the group and say, what are you wanting? How long do you need it for? What are the facilities that you need? Send out a letter of estimated costs at that point, have that signed off on by the group, that they understand that this could be the cost, but it might be over, under, depending on what happens during that event. Then the event's held. We go through and we do our checklist items and make sure everything's being charged accordingly, send that letter out with that bill. as a follow-up. So there's no more, "Well, I didn't know that was gonna cost that much."
Right.
After the fact. We're trying
And
to
we've seen that.
streamline the process.
We've gotten those emails to the board that we rented this facility and no one told us about this charge, and now we've got this extra $300 that we didn't expect, and, you know, this is be better. This, setting it up like you're doing is dynamite.
Can you give me an example of a 501(c) that would rent our facilities?
It's a nonprofit organization.
We have the Jump Rope Club in Maraski as a 501(c)(3), so it's a.
Strongsville Community Theater.
Strongsville Community Theater is one. So those are two that are currently using our facilities that would be a
Okay.
501(c)(3).
And like Rotary, I mean, not that we would, but in the event that we.
Do you know
would.
how much money we've earned from our rentals last year? So are we expecting a 50% increase if we were to do this, or what kind of revenue?
Because I cut off a lot of the revenue source, I did not calculate those numbers to even begin to predict. The last time I know that I personally went through was a few years ago, to look at what our facility rentals were, what our net profit was, and it was
George,
well
you
under.
may have that.
I don't have the net, but the gross revenues is about 50 to 60,000.
I like the approach, Steve. I think I don't think you're gonna get any argument that we should treat groups in similar fashion. You know, finding out that one group has a sweetheart deal because it's been done for, 10 years ago versus a new group having a different deal, that's not fair to the taxpayer, it's not fair to the individual group, so I like that. The only trivia question I was curious about is whether you asked the other school districts what their income was. Because it's one thing to peg it to match, it's another, at the end of the day, I'd rather have 3 rentals at $100 each than 1 rental at $200. So I'd be curious to see what their actual income is. It may not matter.
Okay.
And then the only other 2 things I would ask you to consider is some of the groups, that second-tier groups, if they clean up after themselves, there should be no custodial fees, unless you're proposing that it's just a fixed charge. But a lot of those groups come in and leave the place nicer than when they got there, and then the thought of having a custodial fee probably would have a little heartburn, but that's one thing to consider. And perhaps something along the lines of, if I use the Boys and the Girl Scouts, if the students or if the participants are members of that grade school, it kind of tips it into tier 1 versus tier 2. So
Well,
I think that's something to consider.
To answer your last point, if it's a group meeting and it's during the normal working, it's at the high school, which we have 3 shifts there, they would not be charged. But if it's on a Sunday and it's an event where there's a few hundred people coming in and out, we need to make sure the bathrooms are restocked and everything like that, that's when I would say they move to tier 2. So it wouldn't
And
be
that
the
seems
normal.
reasonable.
Yep.
And then the other comment is the other way, even if it's an internal SCS group, if they're doing a fundraiser, I think that's a little different than if they're doing a meeting. And that's something to consider as far as purpose and when you charge and when you don't.
Okay.
How about security? Do we have any security fees, or like, if they're gonna we can't have just anybody's rent-a-cop in there. So how do we consider security into this? Because that's a big concern, after hours access to the schools with no controls.
We have not provided security at these type of events. Usually the security is only at our games, dances, things that, the large volume events that we have in-house. We have not required any security at some of the events that we have, that would be from the tier 3 groups at this point.
I think about how we control access to certain areas of the school, even if you have the gates up in the high school, for example, but they have access to the gym, the locker rooms, the lockers, those kinds of things. That's a concern. So I don't know, we might need to look at that.
Okay.
Good job.
Do you have one more slide?
I know.
This is something, and again, it's just a discussion point tonight, but this would be what I propose. I have on the left what we're currently charging, and then on the right, what I would suggest that we do charge. You can see from the auditorium, going from 50 to 150 is probably the biggest increase on there. Again, that's keeping us in line with the other groups, the other school districts that are similar to us that offer that type of facility. In some cases, they double. To be quite honest with the classrooms, we've put a lot of money, a lot of technology into our classrooms, and when we rent our classrooms, all of that's available for them.
$30 for an hour in one of those classrooms. I mean, their alternative, that's cheap. Their alternative is going to one of the local hotels or somewhere to get space like that, and you're just not gonna get it. So I think that's a good number. That's a very fair number.
I think you were more than reasonable, to be honest with you, like the athletic fields, $150 or $300 with the lights, that's low.
It kept us in line with the other groups,
Perfect.
and I'm not trying to gouge anybody.
No, you just wanna get,
I'm just trying to make it so that we do get some return on the investment we've made into these areas. Even if that return is we just are able to break even on keeping up the facilities.
no, it's excellent.
The only thing that I would mention is the media center is a big space at the high school. It's a very large space that can hold a few hundred people.
Seems low.
I would consider moving that number up.
Okay.
In both places, actually, the middle
Wow.
school as well.
Yeah, absolutely. But the media center at the high school, we designed it for students. I mean, it's 2 levels. You have a cafe there. It's a big space. If anybody wanted to hold an event, they could do it in the media center pretty easy. I mean, you probably could fit, 200 people in that space, if not more.
Yeah, that'd be easy.
I would consider moving that $30 figure up. I mean, I
$100.
wouldn't be shy to even say it's $100 an hour. But just some thoughts, talk about it internally, it's between you guys.
So one of the things is Steve and I have talked is, if the board remembers, you have to approve rental rates every year. And so we've continued with our old rental rates. Steve's got his feedback. He'll share some, follow-up in our updates, but this will be on the September, what would that be, the 20th meeting for your consideration. I did just want to make one point in terms of the auditorium. Although triple the current costs may seem, like a large jump, we do have people that have asked us, would we lock them in for 3 years to the event that they have in the spring? And we are getting numerous groups that network with each other to come in and ask for locking them into deals for 3 years because of that number being so low. So,
No locks.
yeah, no, obviously we can't do that, we don't do that, but.
No locks, no bagels.
But, we'll have that for the 20th agenda and give you kind of an update after the feedback Steve's gotten today, and you guys can take that under consideration on the 20th.
Excellent. Good job. This was
Thank
something
you.
that was out of control. I mean, we brought some controls into it about a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, and we changed some of the rules, but you've taken it a big step forward, so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the feedback. The second item on the agenda is the copier and printer maintenance agreement. Be it resolved on the recommendation of the superintendent and operations manager that the operations manager be authorized to renew the agreement with ACE Business Solutions for district copiers and printers. The agreement is to be effective 1 year, September 4th, 2018 to September 3rd, 2019, and the cost is based on the monthly meter program found in Exhibit A. The third item is a piano purchase for Strongsville High School. Be it resolved, upon recommendation of the superintendent, the Board of Education approves the purchase for Strongsville High School of a Boston GP 215 7-foot piano made by Steinway from Steinway Piano Gallery at a cost of $44,547.35. This price includes a deduction of trade-in value of $1,650 for a current high school grand piano. Funding for this purchase is from ongoing donations and the general fund, and that is Exhibit B.
So I have a couple questions. For the trade-in of the piano that we currently have, it's $1,650. Have we had a discussion with Steinway to see what it would cost to rehab that piano and take it to the middle school?
Yes, we have, and so, we had folks come in, take a look at the piano. I can't remember the cost off the top of my head, whether it was $6,000 or, I can't remember, I'd have to look at my notes, but, the cost to, it's from the 1970s. The cost to rehab the piano, I could look, like I said, I think it was $6,000. But the recommendation from the piano experts is that it's not gonna give you any life for the piano and the sound quality is not gonna be there, so it's not worth the investment to rehab it. The trade-in will get, the cover and the dolly to keep it on, will pay for those costs.
And then how much of the $44,547 has been fundraised already?
They have about 23,000?
About, there was, a little over 6,000 currently, and then, the Rotary has committed 15,000. So about,
21 and
about
change.
22,000.
22 change.
And so one of the things I just want to make clear is that the other funding is coming from the general fund. However, that's a part of their already allocated instrument replacement budget. So every year, through the instrumental music department, they have a budget to replace instruments. Mr. Hires made the decision to use a portion of that to fund the piano. So in terms of our budget for the instrumental music program, it's not going to change. It's not new money that's going towards them. They're using their replacement budget. And then the idea being is they're continuing to fundraise. And then when they fundraise additional dollars, that will go supplant the money that was used from their instrument replacement budget when it comes in.
And Mr. Ryba, that was correct what you said. It was 6,000 to rehab that, piano.
Oh, was it 6,000?
Yeah, it was
Thank you.
6,000.
I think we need to have a separate piano fundraising event.
So I was just gonna highlight that, the reason this is on the agenda now is because of the savings we're gonna get by jumping on this now. And we've done this in other decisions, especially with our construction project. But we have an opportunity. I trust Mr. Hires' recommendation at the end of the day. I don't grasp all the details as far as Steinway having a fire sale, but I'm sure Mr. Hire knows what he's doing per se. But I do want to highlight the idea that he is, we're not upping our budget, and the risk would be that if they don't backfill through donations, eventually other instruments, you're going to have to extend that maintenance out. I think it's a reasonable risk. I support the risk, but I wanted to highlight that is the ultimately what the risk is that we're choosing.
And as Mr. Micko stated, it is an $8,000 reduction in price of what it was marked as. So that is, it was on the floor for 53 and sold for 45. So Mr. Hires been shopping around since we started this initiative about 8 months ago, and this is a 7-foot piano. He was originally looking at a 6-foot piano. A 7-foot piano is the right piano for that space. And as I spent a lot of time with Andy, they actually bring in templates of the piano to make sure it can physically move through our doorway. So he showed me pictures of it being in the choir room and then moving through the corners to get to the stage, so we know when it comes everything will fit and everything will go through, and it's going to be a beautiful instrument for the next 50 years for our students and community to enjoy.
And Cameron, so that we've said it out loud, highlighting that we're now going to have the burden of making sure to maintain that.
Correct.
And making sure that we tune it and take care of it on a regular basis. And it's a beautiful $50,000 instrument, and for us to make sure it's going to last 50 years, we have to treat it the same way we treat all our facilities. Yep. And plan for it.
Correct.
Are we sure that the discount is real? I mean, I know we were gonna pay for it, but, you frequently go in and prices are marked up at retail,
Sure.
and you leave at a lower price. So is this actually a markdown for any specific reason for this one unit, or?
The reason when I talked to Andy is that it was simply moving inventory. He didn't want to continue to have that inventory in his showroom and was looking to move it out. Andy would have all the specifics, but to me, it sounded like almost like cars. This is last year's model, and we want to move it out to make room for the new models that are
Okay,
coming in.
sounds good.
And it's a Steinway. I mean, it's a wonderful instrument.
Doesn't sound that good when I play it.
I'm just
Let
curious, you
William
said they're
play it.
gonna move it
Yeah,
from
let
the
William play it.
choir room onto the stage? They're gonna use it every day?
Correct, yeah, so it's in the choir room to be used on a daily basis with the vocal program and then for performances. That's why we're purchasing that dolly. So it's not on the casters of the piano, but on truly a dolly that it can be moved smoothly and easily and without damage
That
to the
part
piano.
scares me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay,
Well, that concludes Mr. Breckner's report, and next we have Assistant Superintendent Jenny Pilka with the Human Resource Report for the month.
Okay, I have 2 items for your consideration under Human Resources tonight. Under Leadership, I'm pleased to announce I have the recommendation of Ray Ebersol, who will be our interim Athletics and Activities Director. He has already started, and he has worked in Hudson for 14 years as their athletic director, and retired from there and has graciously agreed to come help us out. He's doing a phenomenal job so far, and we're excited to have him. And then I have Dennis Ziegler for your consideration for Athletics and Activity Director to serve as our new athletic director, and he will begin January 2nd. And Denny is from West Bend School District in Wisconsin. He also served as an athletic director in Wellington here in Ohio, and he is from this area and excited to come back, so we're thrilled to have him on board. Ray has assured us that there will be a very smooth transition. He's preparing things and getting them ready so that when Denny takes over in January, everything will be ready to go for him. So we're
Excellent.
thrilled to have them both.
yeah, and I know Denny was a 3-sport high school letterman, and he's a 2-sport college athlete. He runs a big program in Wisconsin and has done an incredible job there, both in organization, fundraising, and results.
Yes.
He's big on accountability of our coaches, so if you're coaching and you're doing your job, keep at it. If you're coaching and you're not doing your job, you might want to sharpen your pencil. In addition to that, his brother is a local sports announcer, so he comes from a good local family, and I'm excited to have him here, and looking forward to it.
As are we. There will be an official press release that will go out tomorrow, so you can read all the details in Dan's press release. And under C2, I have a settlement agreement. Be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that the settlement agreement between the Strongsville Board of Education and the Ohio Association of Public School Employees, Local 290, be approved as stated in the exhibit, and this does require a vote.
Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Duke. Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Jane. Any discussion? We've all read it. George, take roll.
Colonel Evans?
Yes.
Mrs. Ludwig?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes.
Mr. Naso?
Yes.
Mr. Grozan?
Yes.
Motion passes.
And that concludes my report.
I just got a comment on Jenny's comment about Mr. Ebersol. I met him at the game on Friday, one of the first guy, I guess, and he's a really good guy. He seems like he's doing a great job, and he wasn't even mad after we beat Hudson.
It wasn't.
Excellent. That brings us to the consent calendar. All items with an asterisk are approved in a single vote. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Duke. Have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Jane. Any discussion? There's no modifications to the consent calendar at all as it appears in the agenda. Any discussion? George, take roll.
Colonel Evans?
Yes.
Mrs. Ludwig?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes.
Mr. Naso?
Yes.
Mr. Grozan?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Excellent. Board of Education, other, I do have one. I know a lot of people are concerned, they've seen their property evaluations come out and they've seen their percentage, and as a city, I think we're in the average of 9% is the increased rate. Higher than that, it's a big number. My house didn't go up that much, unfortunately, but, so what I want to do is at the next board meeting or the next work session, the next board meeting, we'll have George Agnasu go through and show you the impact of that. I just want to make it clear that there's House Bill 920 that what it does is, as those valuations go up, it drops the rate in a proportional manner so that the school district gets approximately the same amount of money. There are some inside millage issues related to that that does make it go up a little bit, but I just wanted people to understand that just because your property value went up 9% or 10% or 6%, it doesn't mean that your school taxes will go up at that equivalent rate. House Bill 920 was put in place in the 70s when property values were skyrocketing and school districts were collecting all this money on those revaluations, and that's not how it works. So if you're looking at it, there's not every tax is impacted by 920, but most of the taxes that are on your tax bill are impacted by 920. And certainly any school district-related taxes are influenced by House Bill 920. So at the next meeting, we'll have George go through some typical calculations, so you'll see that, the increase is significantly less than what your appraisal went up. In fact, if your home actually went up less than the city average, it's possible that you could see a tax reduction. So I just wanted you to be aware of that. We've gotten a lot of calls, some concern, talked to some neighbors and local things, and they were concerned about it. So we're going to go through that and show you. It's a very complicated calculation, but we'll boil it down and show you kind of some of the typical impacts you can expect to see. But I can tell you that your school taxes will not go up at anywhere close to the rate that valuation went up. Correct, George? Anything to add to that?
Correct. As you mentioned, House Bill 920 adjusts the effective rate. So the taxes, the levies that are subject to the effective rate is going to drop by that percent increase. And then it's set at the citywide. So the only portions that could go up because of it are the inside millage. Those aren't subject to House Bill 920. So those are taxed at what the rate is, whether it goes up or down. Inside millage as a city, there's 10 mils of inside millage spread out through the whole city. The school district gets about 5.6 mils of that. The city has the exact number, but it's right around 3 mils. Then the rest is spread between the county and the metro parks.
But that's a small
That's
portion of the total valuation. So
Right.
We'll
So-
show the impacts. We'll take it through. It's difficult to talk through, but it'll be easier if we throw up some math. So we'll take you through that. But I just want to assure people that it's not going to be,
Yeah, it's not going to be a one-for-one
right,
increase.
yeah.
It depends on where you are within that 9% increase. If so, the 9% is an average. Some are above, some are below. So it's that's kind of the baseline is at 9%.
Okay,
I have two others.
two others.
First of all, September the 18th is the birthday of the United States Air Force, 71 years. So I'd like to mention that for anybody that follows those kinds of things out there. Aim high. And the second thing is the VFW, our post in Strongsville will be having their community day on Saturday from 1 to 5 at the post. If you haven't been there, I recommend strongly that you come and see. There will be some military equipment on display. There's free food and good camaraderie, and you can get to see the post that normally is closed to non-veteran, non-foreign war veterans. So invite everybody in the community to come out and see a wonderful post in the community. That's it.
Today I had the pleasure of meeting with PTA, and tomorrow we do have a Rocking at the Rec. For students, it's school spirit wear theme. On the 27th, for you high school students that want to be a DARE role model, there will be additional information out there, but on 9/27 there'll be DARE role models. 10/4, October 4th, is the Taste of Strongsville from Strongsville Rotary. Every dollar introduced or fundraised from that, and it'll be at Petiti's, goes towards scholarships. So please come out, support the Strongsville Rotary. We do a lot to try to give back to the community. And then final comment is on October 11th, there'll be a DARE Halloween dance at Mashad's for 7th and 8th graders from 6 to 9. And on the 12th, from 5th and 6th graders at Mashad's from 6 to 9 o'clock. And then hopefully, Dan, I'll give you this list. Dan, if you want to throw it in your next update. Thank you.
I have a quick other.
Yes, yes.
So the athletic booster car raffle has begun in earnest. There are only 3,000 tickets. They have all been distributed to our student athletes, who will be the only way to buy a ticket. Tickets are $20 each, and you can win a 2018 Chevy Cruze. And if you want to check that car out, it's currently parked at the middle school, so you can evaluate if you need a new car or not. But $20, you can turn it into a 2018 Chevy Cruze. You can get tickets at the middle school or any of our student athletes. But like I said before, there are only 3,000 tickets, so it'll be a fun raffle, and we hope to sell all 3,000 tickets.
Any others? Well, we've had 2 incredible football games this season. We're after 2-0 with 2 exciting games. Beat Hudson last week. That was quite pleasurable. Berea Mid Park the week before, also very pleasurable. And this week we've got Canton Central Catholic. It's an away game, but it's nice that the Strongsville guys travel well, so I expect a big crowd there as well. That's it. Anybody else? We do have, if we don't have any others, we do have a need for executive session for negotiations.
To prepare
and-
for negotiations or bargaining sessions with public employees concerning their compensation or other terms and conditions of their employment, and to consider matters required to be kept confidential by federal law or regulations or state statutes.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you.
Man, that was
George,
fast.
take roll.
Colonel Evans?
Yes.
Mrs. Ludwig?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes.
Mr. Naso?
Yes.
Mr. Grozan?
Yes.
We'll enter
Enter-
executive session at 8 o'clock, and we do not have any business to resume when we come.